Hello, and welcome to my YouTube channel, Reading Little Blue Books Out Loud While Stoned. Today, we start part 5 and the final part of Little Blue Book number 93, titled How to Live 100 Years. Now, this book was originally written in the 1500s, and I am reading from the translated from the Italian of the Venice edition of 1612. So this guy had figured out how to live to be 100 in the 1500s without modern medicine or any of the like. So here we go. This is part 5 and the final part. New chapter. An earnest exhortation, wherein the author uses the strongest arguments to persuade all men to embrace a regular and sober life, in order to attain old age, in which they may enjoy all the favors and blessings that God in his goodness vouchsafes to bestow upon mortals. Not to be wanting to my duty, that duty incumbent upon every man, and not to lose at the same time the satisfaction I feel in being useful to others, I have resolved to take up my pen and inform those who, for want of conversing with me, are strangers to what those know and see, with whom I have the pleasure of being acquainted. That's a bit of a mouthful. But, as certain things may appear to some persons scarce, credible, nay, impossible, though actually fact, I shall not fail to relate them for the benefit of the public, or for the benefit of the public. Wherefore, I say, being, God be praised, arrived at my 95th year, and still finding myself sound and heartily content and cheerful, I never cease thanking the divine majesty for so great a blessing. Considering the usual fate of other old men, those scarce attain the age of 70 without losing their health and spirits, growing melancholy and peevish, and continually haunted by the thoughts of death, apprehending their last hour from one day to another, so that it is impossible to drive such thoughts out of their mind. Whereas such things give me not the least uneasiness, for indeed I cannot at all make them the object of my attention, as I shall hereafter more plainly relate. I shall, besides, demonstrate the certainty I have of living to 100. But to render this dissertation more methodical, I shall begin by considering man at his birth, and from thence accompany him through every stage of life to his grave. Boy, that word was just, I've got an itch right over here. Okay, accompany him through every stage of life to his grave. I, therefore, say that some come into the world with the stamina of life so weak that they live but a few days or months or years, and it cannot be clearly known to what such shortness of life is owing, whether to some defect in the father or the mother in begetting them, or to the revolution of the heavens, or to the defect of nature, subject as she is to the celestial influence. For I could never bring myself to believe that nature, the common parent of all, should be partial to any of her children. Therefore, as we cannot assign the causes, we must be content with reasoning from the effects, such as they daily appear in our view. Others are born sound, indeed, and full of spirits, but, notwithstanding, with a poor weakly constitution. And of these, some live to the age of 10, others to 20, others to 30 and 40, yet they do not live to extreme old age. Others, again, bring into the world a perfect constitution, and live to an old age, but it is generally, as I have already said, an old age full of sickness and sorrow, for which they are to thank themselves, because they most unreasonably presume on the goodness of their constitution, and cannot by any means be brought to depart, when grown old, from... That doesn't make sense. It's because it's not the right page. There we go. When grown old, from the mode of life they pursued in their younger days, as if they still retained all their primitive vigor. Nay, they intend to live as irregularly when past the meridian of life, as they did all the time of their youth, thinking they shall never grow old, nor their constitution be ever impaired. Neither do they consider that their stomach has lost its natural heat, and that they should on that account pay a greater regard to the quality of what they eat, and what wines they drink, and likewise to the quantity of each, which they ought to lessen. Whereas, on the contrary, they are for increasing it, saying that as we lose our health and vigor by growing old, we should endeavor to repair the loss by increasing the quantity of our food, since it is by sustenance that man is preserved. In this, nevertheless, they are greatly mistaken, since as a man grows in years, he should diminish the quantity of his meat and drink, nature, especially at that period, being content with little. Nay, though they have all the reason to believe this to be the case, they are so obstinate as to think otherwise, and still follow their usual disorderly life. But were they to relinquish it in due time, and betake themselves to a regular and sober course, they would not grow infirm in their old age, but would continue, as I am, strong and hearty, considering how good and perfect the constitution it has pleased the Almighty to bestow upon them, and would live to the age of 120. This has been the case of others, who, as we read in many authors, have lived a sober life, and of course were born with this perfect constitution. And had it been my lot to enjoy such a constitution, I should make no doubt of attaining the same age. But as I was born with feeble stamina, I am afraid I shall not outlive 100. Were others, too, who are also born with an infirm constitution, to betake themselves to a regular life, as I have done, they would attain the age of 100 and upwards, as will be my case. And this contrary of being able to live a great age is, in my opinion, a great advantage and highly to be valued, not being sure to live even a single hour, except such as adhere to the rules of temperance. This security of life is built on good and true natural reasons which can never fail. It being impossible in the nature of things that he who leads a sober and regular life should breed any sickness or die of an unnatural death before the time at which it is absolutely impossible he should live. But sooner he cannot die, as a sober life has the virtue to remove all the usual causes of sickness, and sickness cannot happen without a cause, which cause being removed, sickness is likewise removed, and sickness being removed, an untimely and violent death must be prevented. And there is no doubt that temperance has the virtue and efficacy to remove such causes. For since health and sickness, life and death depend on the good or bad quality of the humors, temperance corrects their vicious tendencies and renders them perfect, being possessed of the natural power of making them unite and hold together so as to render them inseparable and incapable of alteration or fermenting. Circumstances which render cruel fevers and end in death, it is true indeed, and it would be a folly to deny it, that let our humours be originally ever so good, time, which consumes everything, cannot fail to consume and exhaust them, and that man, as soon as that happens, must die of a natural death, but yet without sickness, as will be my case. Who shall die at my appointed time, when these humours shall be consumed, which they are not at present? Nay, they are still perfect. Nor is it possible they should be otherwise in my present condition, when I find myself hearty and content, eating with a good appetite and sleeping soundly. Moreover, all my faculties are as good as ever, and in the highest perfection, my understanding clearer and brighter than ever, my judgment sound, my memory tenacious, my spirits good, and my voice, the first thing which is apt to fail others, grown so strong and sonorous, that I cannot help chatting out loud my prayers morning and night, instead of whispering and muttering them to myself, as was formerly my custom. Boy, but that's annoying. And these are all so many true and sure signs and tokens that my humors are good, and cannot waste but with time, as all those who can converse with me conclude. Oh, how glorious this life of mine is like to be, replete with all the felicities which man can enjoy on this side of the grave, and even exempt from that sensual brutality which age has enabled my better reason to banish. Because where reason resides, there is no room for sensuality, nor for its bitter fruits, the passions, the protuberances of the mind, with a train of disagreeable apprehensions. Nor yet can the thoughts of death find room in my mind, as I have no sensuality to nourish such thoughts. Neither can the death of grandchildren and other relations and friends make any impression on me. But for a moment or two, and then it is over. Still less am I liable to be cast down by losses in point of fortune, as many have seen in their no small surprise. And this is a happiness not to be expected by any but such as attain old age by sobriety, and not in consequence of a strong constitution. And such may moreover expect to spend their days happily, as I do mine, in a perpetual round of amusement and pleasure. And how is it impossible a man should not enjoy himself, who meets with no crosses or disappointments in his old age, such as youth is constantly plagued with, and from which, as I shall presently show, I have the happiness of being exempt? The first of these is to do service to my country. Oh, what a glorious amusement, in which I find infinite delight, as I thereby show her the means of improving her important estuary or behavior beyond the probability of its filling for thousands of years to come, so as secure to Venice her surprising and miraculous title of a maiden city, as she really is, and the only one in the whole world. She will, turn the page, she will, moreover, thereby add to the luster of her great and excellent surname of Queen of the Sea. Such is my amusement, and nothing is wanting to make it complete. Another amusement of mine is that of showing this maid and queen in what manner she may abound with provisions by improving large tracts of land, as well marshes or as barren sands, to great profit. A third amusement is an amusement too, without any alloy, is the showing how Venice, though already so strong as to be in a manner impregnable, may be rendered still stronger, and though extremely beautiful, may still increase in beauty, though rich, may acquire more wealth, and may be made to enjoy better air, though her air is excellent. These three amusements, all arising from the idea of public utility, I enjoy in the highest degree. And who can say that they admit of any alloy, as in fact they do not? Another comfort I enjoy is that, having lost a considerable part of my income, of which my grandchildren had been unfortunately robbed, I, by mere dint of thought, which never sleeps, and without any fatigue of body, and very little of mind, have found a true and infallible method of repairing such loss, more than double by the means of that most commendable of arts, agriculture. Another comfort I still enjoy is to think that my treatise or temperance, which I write in order to be useful to others, is really so, as many as many assure me by word of mouth, mentioning that it has proved extremely useful to them, as it in fact appears to have been. Whilst others inform me by letter that under God they are indebted to me for life. Still another comfort I enjoy is that of being able to write with my own hand, for I write enough to be of service to others, both on architecture and agriculture. I likewise enjoy another satisfaction, which is that of conversation with men of bright parts and superior understanding, from whom even at this advanced period of life I learn something. What a comfort is this, that, old as I am, I should be able without the least fatigue to study the most important, sublime, and difficult subjects. I must further add, though it may appear impossible to some, and may be so in some measure, that at this age I enjoy at once two lives, one terrestrial, which I possess in fact, the other celestial, which I possess in thought. And this thought is equal to actual enjoyment, when founded upon things we are sure to attain, as I am sure to attain that celestial life, through the infinite goodness and mercy of God. Thus I enjoy this terrestrial life in consequence of my sobriety and temperance, virtues so agreeable to the deity, and I enjoy, by the grace of the same divine majesty, the celestial, which he makes me anticipate in thought, a thought so lively as to fix me entirely on this subject, the enjoyment of which I hold and affirm to be of the utmost certainty. And I hold that dying in the manner I expect is not really death, but a passage of the soul from this earthly life to a celestial, immortal, and infinitely perfect existence. Neither can it be otherwise. And this thought is so superlatively sublime that it can no longer stoop to low and worldly objects, such as the death of this body, being entirely taken up with the happiness of living a celestial and divine life. Whence it is that I enjoy two lives. Neither can the terminating of so high a gratification, which I enjoy in this life, give me any concern. It rather affords me infinite pleasure, as it will be only to make room for another glorious and immortal life. Now, it is possible that any one should grow tired of so great a comfort and blessing as this, which I really enjoy, and which every one else might enjoy by leading the life I have led, an example which every one has in his power to follow. For I am but a mere man, and no saint, a servant of God, to whom so regular a life is extremely agreeable. And whereas many embrace a spiritual and contemplative life, which is holy and commendable, the chief enjoyment of those who lead it being to celebrate the praises of God. Oh, that they would likewise betake themselves entirely to a regular and sober life. How much more agreeable would they render themselves in the sight of God? What a much greater honor and ornament would they be to the world? They would then be considered as saints, indeed, upon the earth, as those primitive Christians were held who joined sobriety to so recluse a life. By living like them, to the age of 120, they might, like them, expect, by the power of God, to work numberless miracles, and they would, besides enjoy constant health and spirits, and be always happy within themselves, whereas they are now, for the most part, infirm, melancholy, and dissatisfied. Now, as some of these people think that these are trials sent them by God Almighty, with a view of promoting their salvation, that they may do penance in this life for their past errors, I cannot help saying that, in my opinion, they are greatly mistaken. For I can by no means believe that it is agreeable to the deity that man, his favorite creature, should live infirm, melancholy, and dissatisfied, but rather enjoy good health and spirits, and be always content within himself. In this manner, did the Holy Fathers live, and by such conduct did they daily render themselves more acceptable to the divine majesty, so as to work the great and surprising miracles we read of in history. How beautiful, how glorious a scene should we then behold, far more beautiful than in those ancient times, because we now abound with so many religious orders, and were the members of these communities to lead a temperate life. We should then behold and monasteries which did not then exist, such a number of venerable old men as would create surprise. Nor would they trespass against their rules. They would rather improve upon them, since every religious community allows its subjects bread, wine, and sometimes eggs. Some of them allow meat, besides soups made with vegetables, salads, fruit, and cakes, things which often disagree. Okay, turning the page. Things that often disagree with them, and even shorten their lives. But as they are allowed such things by their rules, they freely make use of them, thinking perhaps that it would be wrong to abstain from them, whereas it would not. It would rather they abstain from such food and confine themselves to bread, wine, broths, and eggs. For this is the true method of preserving man of a bad constitution, and it is a life of more indulgence than that led by the Holy Fathers of the desert, who subsisted entirely on wild fruits and roots, and drank nothing but pure water, and nevertheless lived, as I have already mentioned, in good health and spirits, and always happy within themselves. Were those of these days to do the same, they would, like them, find the road to heaven much easier, for it is always open to every faithful Christian, as our Savior Jesus Christ left it, when he came down upon earth to shed his precious blood in order to deliver us from the tyrannical servitude of the devil, and all through his immense goodness. So that, to make an end of this discourse, I say that since length of days abounds with so many favors and blessings, and I happen to be one of those who has arrived at that state, I cannot but give testimony in favor of it, and solemnly assure all mankind that I really enjoy a great deal more than what I now mention, and that I have no other reason for writing but that of demonstrating the great advantages which arise from longevity, to the end that their own conviction may induce them to observe those excellent rules of temperance and sobriety. And therefore I never cease to raise my voice, crying out to you, my friends, may your days be long, that you may be the better servants to the Almighty. And that, I think, is the end. Oh no, there's another one. Letter from Signor Lewis Cornaro to the Right Reverend Barbero, Patriarch-elect of Aquila. My Lord, the human understanding must certainly have something divine in its constitution and frame. How divine the invention of conversing with an absent friend by the help of writing. How divinely it is contrived by nature that men, though at a great distance, should see one another with the intellectual eye, as I now see your lordship. By means of this contrivance I shall endeavor to entertain you with matters of the greatest moment. It is true that I shall speak of nothing but what I have already mentioned, but it was not at the age of 91 to which I have now attained, a thing I cannot help taking notice of, because as I advance in years, the sounder and healthier I grow, to the amazement of all the world. I, who can account for it, am bound to show that a man may enjoy a terrestrial paradise after 80, which I enjoy, but it is not to be obtained except by temperance and sobriety, virtues so acceptable to the Almighty, because they are enemies to sensuality and friends to reason. Now, my lord, to begin, I must tell you that within these few days past I have been visited by many of the learned doctors of this university, as well physicians as philosophers, who were well acquainted with my age, my life, and manners, knowing how stout, hearty and gay I was, and in what perfection all my faculties still continued, likewise my memory, spirits, and understanding, and even my voice and teeth. They knew, besides, that I constantly enjoyed 8 hours every day in writing treatises with my own hand on subjects useful to mankind, and spent many hours in walking and singing. O my Lord, how melodious my voice has grown! Were you to hear me chant my prayers, and that to my lyre after the example of David, I am certain it would give you great pleasure. My voice is so musical. Now, when they told me that they had been already acquainted with all of these particulars, they added that it was indeed next to a miracle, how I could write so much and upon subjects that required both judgment and spirit. And indeed, my Lord, it is indescribable what satisfaction and pleasure I have in these compositions. But as I write to be useful, your lordship may easily conceive what pleasure I enjoy. They concluded by telling me that I ought not to be looked upon as a person advanced in years, since all my occupations were those of a young man, and by no means like those of other aged persons who, when they have reached 80, are reckoned decrepit. Such, moreover, are subject, some to the gout, some to the sciatica, and some to other complaints, to be relieved from which they must undergo such a number of painful operations as cannot but render life extremely turning the page. Extremely disagreeable. And if, by chance, one of theirs happens to escape a long illness, his faculties are impaired, and he cannot see or hear so well, or else fails in some one or another of the corporeal faculties. He cannot walk, or his hands shake, and supposing him exempt from these bodily infirmities, his memory, his spirits, or his understanding fail him. He is not cheerful, pleasant, and happy within himself, as I am. Besides all these blessings, I mentioned another which I enjoyed, and so great a blessing that they were all amazed at it, since it is altogether beside the usual course of nature. This blessing is that I had already lived 50 years in spite of a most powerful and mortal enemy, which I can by no means conquer, because it is natural, or an occult quality implanted in my body by nature. And this is that every year, from the beginning of July to the end of August, I cannot drink any wine, or whatever kind or country, for besides being during these 2 months quite disgustful to my palate, it disagrees with my stomach. Thus losing my milk for wine is indeed the milk of an old age. And having nothing to drink, for no chance or preparation of waters can have the virtue of wine, nor of course do me any good. Having nothing, I say, to drink, and my stomach being thereby disordered, I can eat but very little. And this spared diet, which the want of wine reduces me by the middle of August, extremely low, nor is the strongest capon, broth, or any other remedy of service to me, so that I am ready, through mere weakness, to sink into the grave. Hence they inferred that were not the new wine, for I always take care to have some ready by the beginning of September, to come in so soon, I should be a dead man. But what surprised them still more was that this new wine should have power sufficient to restore me in 2 or 3 days to that degree of health and strength of which the old wine had robbed me, a fact they themselves have been an eye-witness of, wherein these few days, in which a man must see to believe it, insomuch that they could not help crying out. Many of us, who are physicians, have visited him annually for several years past, and 10 years ago judged it impossible for him to live a year or 2 longer, considering what a mortal enemy he carried about him in his advanced age. Yet we do not find him so weak at present as he used to be. This singularity, and the many other blessings they see me enjoy, obliged them to confess that the joining of such a number of favors was, with regard to me, a special grace a special grace conferred on me at my birth by nature or by the stars. And to prove this to be a good conclusion, which it really is not, because not grounded on strong and sufficient reasons, but merely on their own opinions, they found themselves under the necessity to display their eloquence, and to say a great many very fine things. Certain it is, my lord, that eloquence in men of bright parts have great power, so great as to induce people to believe things which have neither actual nor possible existence. I had, however, great pleasure and satisfaction in hearing them, for it must no doubt be a high entertainment to hear such men talk in that manner. Another satisfaction, without the least mixture of alloy, I at the same time enjoyed, was to think that age and experience are sufficient to make a man learned, who without them would know nothing. Nor is it surprising they should, since length of days is the foundation of true knowledge. Accordingly, it was by means of it alone I discovered their conclusion to be false. Thus, you see, my lord, how apt men are to deceive themselves in their judgment of things, when such judgment is not built upon a solid foundation, and therefore, to undeceive them and set them right, I made answer that their conclusion was false, as I should actually convince them by proving that the happiness I enjoyed was not confined to me, but common to all mankind, and that every man might equally enjoy it, since I was but a mere mortal, composed like all others of the four elements, and endued, besides existence and life, with rational and intellectual faculties which are common to all men. For it has pleased the Almighty to bestow on his favorite creature, man, these extraordinary blessings and favors above other animals, which enjoy only the sensible perceptions, in order that such blessing and favor may be the means of keeping him long in good health, so that length of days is an universal favor granted by the deity, and not by nature and the stars. But man, being in his youthful days more of the sensual than of the rational animal, is apt to yield to sensual impressions, and when he afterwards arrives at the age of 40 or 50, he ought to consider that he has attained the noon of life by the vigor of youth and a good tone of stomach, natural blessings which favored him in ascending the hill, but that he must now think of going down and approaching the grave with a heavy weight of years on his neck, or on his back, and that old age is the reverse of youth, as much as order is the reverse of disorder. Hence, it is requisite he should alter his mode of life in regard to the articles of eating and drinking on which health and longevity depend. And as the first part of his life was sensual and irregular, the second should be the reverse, since nothing can subsist without order, especially the life of man, irregularity being without all doubt prejudicial, and regularity advantageous to the human species. Besides, it is impossible in the nature of things that the man who is bent on indulging his palate and his appetite should not be guilty of irregularity. Hence, it was that to avoid this vice, as soon as I found myself arrived at maturer years, I embraced a regular and sober life. It is no doubt true that I found some difficulty in compassing it, but in order to conquer this difficulty, I beseeched the Almighty to grant me the virtue of sobriety, well knowing that he would graciously hear my prayer. Then, considering that when a man is about to undertake anything of importance, which he knows he can compass, though not without difficulty, he may make it much easier to himself by being steady in his purpose. I pursued the same course. I endeavored gradually to relinquish a disorderly life and to accustom myself insensibly to the rules of temperance, and thus it came to pass that a sober and regular life no longer provided uneasy or disagreeable, though on account of the weakness of my constitution, I tied myself down to such strict rules in regard to the quantity and quality of what I eat and drink. But others, who happen to be blessed with a stronger temperament, may eat many other kinds of food, and in greater quantities, and so of wines, whereas, though their lives may still be sober, they will not be so confined as mine, but much more free. Now, on hearing these arguments and examining the reasons on which they were founded, they all agreed that I had advanced nothing but what was true. Indeed, the youngest of them said that though he could not but allow the favors or advantages I had been speaking of to be common to all mankind, yet I enjoyed the special grace of being able to relinquish with ease one kind of life and embrace another, a thing which he knew by experience to be feasible, but as difficult to him as it had proved easy to me. To this I replied, that being a mortal like himself, I likewise found it a difficult task, but it did not become a person to shrink from a glorious but practicable undertaking on account of the difficulties attending it, because in proportion to these difficulties and the humor he acquires by it in the eye of man and the merit in the sight of God, our beneficent Creator is desirous that, as he originally favored human nature with longevity, we should all enjoy the full advantage of his intentions, knowing that when a man has passed 80, he is entirely exempt from the bitter fruits of sensual enjoyments and is entirely governed by the dictates of reason. Vice and immorality must then leave him. Hence God is willing he should live to a full maturity of years, and has ordered that whoever reaches his natural term should end his days without sickness, by mere dissolution, the natural way of quitting this mortal life to enter upon immortality, as will be my case, for I am sure to die chanting my prayers, nor do the dreadful thoughts of death give me the least uneasiness, though considering my great age, it cannot be far distant, knowing, as I do, that I was born to die, and reflecting that such numbers have departed this life without reaching my age. Nor does that other thought, inseparable from the former, namely the fear of those torments to which wicked men are hereafter liable, give me any uneasiness, because I am a good Christian, and bound to believe that I shall be saved by the virtue of the most sacred blood of Christ, which he has vouchsafed to shed in order to free us from those torments. How beautiful the life I lead! How happy my end! To this, the young gentleman, my antagonist, had nothing to reply, but that he was resolved to embrace a sober life, in order to follow my example, and that he had taken another, more important resolution, which was, that as he had been always very desirous to live to be old, so he was now equally impatient to reach that period, the sooner to enjoy the felicity of old age. The great desire I had, my lord, to converse with you at this distance has forced me to prolix, and still obliges me to proceed, though not much further. There are many sensualists, my lord, who say that I have thrown away my time and trouble in writing a treatise on temperance, and other discourses on the same subject to induce men to lead a regular life, alleging that it is impossible to conform to it, so that my treatise must answer as little purpose as that of Plato on government, who took a great deal of pains to recommend a thing impracticable. Whence they inferred that as his treatise was of no use, mine will share the same fate. Now this surprises me the more, as they may see by my treatise that I had led a sober life for many years before I had composed it, and that I should never have composed it had I not previously been convinced that it was such a life as a man might lead, and being a virtuous life, would it be great service to him, so that I thought myself under an obligation to represent it in a true light. I have the satisfaction now to hear that numbers, on seeing my treatise, have embraced such a life, and I have read that many, in time past, have actually led it, so that the objection to which Plato's treatise on government is liable can be of no force against mine. But such sensualists, enemies to reason, and slaves to their passions, ought to think themselves well off, if, whilst they study to indulge their palate and their appetite, they do not contract long and painful diseases, and are not many of them overtaken by an untimely death. And I believe that is the end. Yes, it is. Boom. That is the end of Little Blue Book number 93, written by Lewis Cornaro, titled How to Live 100 Years. Thanks for listening, and join me in the next Little Blue Book.